Arriving in a helicopter are the Aldemir Republic Special Elite Forces, codename Ghost. These soldiers are the world's premier special forces unit, feared by soldiers and terrorist organizations worldwide. And amongst them stands a man called the Strongest, George Sai. Witnessing him annihilate enemies like a killing machine, people called him with reverence and awe, Mr. War. However, on July 6th, 2025, this strongest man would be met with death in battle. On July 6th, 2025, 2:16 a.m., a helicopter carrying the elite forces flies over a church-like building, and they are on an elimination operation to eliminate the terrorist organization Ignite. With strong wind blowing around their landing point, the pilot informs the soldiers of it, saying that the strong winds are destabilizing the aircraft. Calling out to their captain Beck, he tells him that they should change the drop zone. Hearing that, the captain asks if this means that their surprise attack is ruined. Speaking into his earbud, he commands his soldiers to proceed as planned, while thinking to himself that if they were to charge in like this, half of their squad will die. Suddenly, George stands by the door while holding a rope in his hand. Seeing that, the captain rushes to him, asking him as to what he is trying to do. Standing by the window while holding his gun up, he looks back and tells the captain that they should go ahead and rendezvous with the other at point B. Without waiting to hear or speak any further, George jumps off the helicopter holding onto his rope. He then lands on the ground, striking up a heroic pose. The captain then asks the pilot if there is any possibility for them to turn back. Hearing that, the pilot in a hurry says that it's pretty impossible to do. Looking away, he tells the pilot to head to point B while thinking to himself that George better not die. After having landed, George wastes no time and runs towards the door to the inside. As he continues to run towards the door, a little something shines to his side at a faraway distance which George seems to have not noticed. It is a sniper aiming at George, and he suddenly shoots after getting a proper aim at George. While running towards the door, as the sniper shoots, he suddenly hears the sound of the gun and increases his speed and hides behind a statue. Hiding behind the statue, with bullets hitting away at it, he makes out the location of the sniper just by analyzing the direction from which the bullets were hitting the statue. After learning the sniper's location, he suddenly leans out of the statue and shoots. And surprisingly, all the bullets he shot hits the sniper and his dead body falls to the ground. Suddenly, an enemy appears behind him, holding him with a gun to his head. As the enemy just shoots, George turns around and attacks his hand with his elbow. Following with a low sweep, he messes up the enemy's balance. With agile movement, he arrives right behind the enemy, snapping his neck. Having killed the enemy in hand, he soon notices other enemy forces coming his way, holding guns, while telling himself how they finally arrived. Without wasting any further time, the enemy forces start shooting at him. He then pulls up the enemy whose neck he just snapped, using him as a meat shield while he shoots back at the enemy forces. Using the meat shield, he rushes back to the statue and then throws it off and suddenly starts shooting at them while aiming through his scope, killing them. With smoke coming out of his gun's muzzle from the constant firing, he suddenly receives a call on his shoulder walkie-talkie. It's the captain. He's asking him to respond if he's safe. As the sound bothers him, he mutes his walkie-talkie and stealthily walks towards the door in front of him. At a different location, point B, the special elite forces are gathered outside of a door as the captain calls out to someone on the walkie-talkie. A soldier standing behind the captain informs him that they're ready for breach and asks him as to where George is. Replying to his question, the captain tells him how George is not responding to communications. And suddenly, the door they were standing in front of starts to open. Seeing that, the captain and the forces with him get into position to shoot. The captain looks surprised seeing the person who appears. The person that appears through the door is George. He points behind him, telling them that the compound is secured and he needs the captain to handle SSE. As they walk through the sea of corpses created by George, a soldier looks around saying how Mr. War is still a monster as always, while the other soldiers behind them carry a body or two. As they continue walking forward, the captain calls out to George. Pulling him by grabbing his t-shirt, he asks him as to why he acted alone. He then says that those who can't follow orders have no place on the team. George simply just replies saying that the mission is a success and that there's no problem. With cold eyes, he tells the captain that if they had forced the operation in that situation, the unit would have been wiped out and that the captain too knew that possibility. While gritting his teeth, the captain lets out a grunt, calling George a smart mouth. A soldier then approaches them from behind and informs the captain that the commanding officer is calling for him. The captain turns back and walks away lightly, cussing at George as how he always defies orders. As he continues, George interferes, telling him not to misunderstand. Holding his hand by his chest, He says that if there's a way for him to repay the captain, it's only by killing enemies and winning. With a serious yet blank look on his face, he says that he doesn't want to defy him, and that it's for the objective. He looks back at him silently. He turns his head back, embarrassed by his touching speech. Calling him an idiot, he tells him to just go and die. Walking into the vehicle, he tells his soldiers that he's heading to headquarters and that they should do as he instructed them earlier. As the vehicle goes, while looking at the back of the vehicle, George thinks to himself as to what did the captain mean when he said to do as he instructed earlier. He then turns towards the soldiers, asking them as to what instructions did the captain when he said that, only to be surprised by the soldiers holding their guns pointing at him. Pointing their guns at him, one of the soldiers apologizes to him, saying that it's the captain's orders. George then stealthily tries to reach out to his gun on his thigh. With the command to open fire, a bullet directly hits George right in the middle of his temple, splattering blood around. As he gets ravaged by the incoming bullets hitting him, he thinks to himself as to what they meant when they said that they're doing this on Beck's orders. He then questions if Beck planned to kill him from the beginning. He then thinks of a girl named Sophia, thinking to himself that he will definitely come back alive. He then slowly opens his eyes, finding a rotten dead body, with bugs crawling out of its face in front of his eyes as he thinks to himself, realizing that it's the stench of death. Standing in between a pile of rotten corpses, he thinks to himself as to what just happened and that he was definitely in the Ignite elimination operation. And the truck he found himself in suddenly starts unloading the dead bodies into the sea. He then falls over as he loses his footing as the corpses slide down due to the inclined plane. Due to his sharp reflexes, he holds the ground, saving himself from falling into the sea. He then pulls himself up, saying how he just cheated death. He then looks down at the rotten corpse being eaten by an eagle and thinks to himself if these are the front lines of Bizal District. The drivers of the rotten corpse dump truck talk between themselves, saying how hectic garbage cleanup for morning is, while one of them says to think of it as feeding the fish in Tokyo Bay. Looking at the dump truck as it moves forwards, he speaks to himself, saying that if this is Tokyo Bay, then he's in Japan, his homeland, and so the story goes on with George Sai dying on July 6, 2025, and being reincarnated on the island of despair. Looking at the truck, he thinks to himself that the only way he can get some proper information on his location would be that truck over there getting away from him. He then runs through the forest at full speed, hoping to catch the truck, only to be left behind as it drives away, leaving only tire marks for him to follow behind. He stands there with his hand on his chest, panting, thinking to himself how he's just getting winded from just this much running, and asks himself as to what has happened to his body. Looking up at the tree he's standing beside, he thinks to himself that he should first secure water and food for himself. He then climbs up the tree and sits on a branch and drinks water from a bamboo-like bottle. As he rests by the tree, he lets out a sigh, thinking to himself as to how this scenario reminds him of the time when he got separated from friendly forces in the jungle. As he's chilling, sitting on a tree, his eyes fall on a slum-like town bustling with people. He soon enters the town and looks around while thinking to himself as how this area surely seems to be around Tokyo Bay, but Japan never had a slum as such according to his memories. He then suddenly notices a broken mirror in a stand beside him. He looks at the mirror, surprised from seeing himself. Holding his hands up to his face as he looks at himself through the shattered mirror, he thinks to himself, asking if this person is really him and that he looks completely different from his past self. As he still looks at the mirror in surprise, suddenly someone puts a hand on his shoulder, calling out the name Michio. Michio is the name of the person whose body George Sai has been reincarnated into. Though his body and physical traits have been changed, his skills and instincts remain the same. He then suddenly grabs the person by his throat. Surprised by his sudden aggressive behavior, he worriedly tells him to snap out of it and gives him his name, that is Masa, and tells him to calm down. He then finally lets go of Masa, while thinking to himself, asking if this Masa guy is an acquaintance of this body he has reincarnated into. He soon notices that this person doesn't possess any weapons and realizes that this body's name is Michio. As Masa falls to his knees, breathing heavily, Michio apologizes for his rash behavior and holds out his hand for Masa to take and stand up. Holding his hand, Masa says that he's relieved to see him well and tells him how worried he was since he was getting beaten up so much. As Masa takes his hand away, Michio asks him if it's true that he was getting beaten and further asks him as to why he was getting beaten. Surprised by his behavior, Masa tells him that at the mining site, whatever Zeha says is absolute. Suddenly, a huge-statured person with braids appears behind Masa, asking he just called Zeha without using honorifics. This person is Zeha, Putting his hands together, he asks him as to how dare a crew member such as Masa himself, a slave miner, call Zeha without using honorifics. Pulling his hands back, ready to punch at Masa, he screams out as to how it calls for a penalty for daring to call his name without using honorifics. His punch then hits Masa, throwing him back, way further back into a wall. Zeha then walks towards Masa and grabs him by his hair, asking if he's stupid to remember the rules, and repeats it for him, saying that he gets a penalty whenever he makes a mistake, and that he'll also get penalized if he annoys him. Scared, not knowing what to say anymore, he simply just points at Michio in fear, to protect himself from getting any more beaten up, and says that it was Michio who called him without honorifics first, and then mentions how that made him get carried away in the flow of the conversation. Zeha stands up and throws Masa aside as he walks towards Michio, saying that it's amazing how he's still alive after all the beating he gave him. Cracking up his fingers with a proud and huge grin on his face, Zeha mentions how he's raging to give him a nice good beating, shouting out penalty for having an insolent face. Zeha swings out a punch at him, which Michio swiftly dodges while thinking to himself as to how amateurish of a punch this guy is throwing at him. Ducking to another swing of his while getting ready to throw a punch at him, Michio says that he has no hobby of fighting civilians, but if he is going to continue attacking him like this, then he'll subdue him. Hearing him say that, Zeha commends him for knowing how to talk big. Using his bodily force, he strikes him with a straight punch right into his face. That powerless punch of Michio does as little as scratch his nose and push him back, enraging him. He then dashes at Zeha at full speed while thinking to himself as to how weaker this body is than he thought of it to be. Seeing him rush towards him, Zeha instinctively throws a punch at him, which Michio easily dodges. Turning his body at the right moment, he thinks to himself that even with this frail body, if he were to use his elbow with proper momentum, it'll have sufficient strength to at least injure him, and his elbow suddenly hits Zeha right on his nose, pushing it in. Holding onto his nose, Zeha falls to his knees, seeing that Michio tells him that it is impossible for Zeha to subdue him with his combat ability. Glaring at Zeha, he tells him to take his fight somewhere unless he has a death wish. He then turns his back at Zeha to walk away from him, while Zeha reaches to something underneath his shirt. Pulling out a knife out of his shirt, he yells at Michio, saying that anyone who dares to fight back against him gets 100 penalties as he rushes at him with his knife to stab him. Michio, due to his past life survival instincts, easily notices the incoming attack, but he's suddenly interfered by a kid who pushes him away from the knife's trajectory, while calling out to him, telling him to look out for the knife. As the kid rushed to his rescue, pushing him aside, Michio skillfully balances himself back and rushes to Zeha, pushing aside the knife he was about to thrust. Gritting his teeth in rage, Michio asks him if he's ready to fight to the death since he drew a blade against him. Thrusting his hand forward, he hits him right in his voice box, temporarily making him unable to breathe properly and choke. He then throws him off balance and right into the ground. The kid who came to Michio's rescue stands there both shocked as well as surprised by Michio's martial prowess. Michio then sits on Zeha while grabbing him by his neck, pulling his hand back, ready to punch him right in his face. With a terrified look on his face, Zeha soon realizes his defeat. He then pleads to him to wait while he stutters as he asks of that. Gritting his teeth with rage burning in his eyes, Michio tells him that there's no wait in a fight to the death, and so his punch hits Zeha right on his face. With bloodied hands, Michio looks at the battered face of Zeha that he broke with his punches. He then disappointedly looks at his fist while thinking to himself that he was only able to do this little damage even after using his full body weight. With smoke emitting from his bloodied fist, he decides that he first needs to do something about this frail body of his. The kid who helped Michio yells out at him, asking him as to what is going on. Looking at the kid, Michio asks him if they were close. Hearing that, the kid asks him if he's trying to mess with him by trying to ask such ridiculous questions. Being on guard against the kid, Michio tells him that he has lost his memories. Worried by such an answer, the kid introduces himself, calling himself as Kyo, and that he lives next door to his house. Turning his head back again, he apologizes to him, saying that he doesn't remember his name either. As he continues to walk ahead, Kyo follows behind him, and soon Zeha finally comes to his senses. With blood dripping down from his nose into his mouth, with his eyes bulging out in anger, Zeha says that it's finally time to push Michio into super penalty hell. As they walk through the slums, Kyo tries to imitate Michio's moves and asks him if he can teach him how to fight. Finally opening his mouth, Michio asks him to tell him about this island. Putting his hands behind his head, he grinningly says that he sure will. Kyo then tells him that this is the industrial waste island floating in Tokyo Bay. an island full of garbage and trash, with a serious look forming on his face. He thinks to himself if there ever existed such a place in Japan. While they continue forward, Kyo then tells him how the men are forced to work at the mining site, and women and children can only sell things or collect garbage, and with the security as terrible as it is, he finalizes by calling the island a cesspit. Looking around, he thinks to himself how this is worse than a slum in a conflict zone. Michio then suddenly notices Kyo drooling over a loaf of bread. The shopkeeper, on seeing the kid drooling, tells him to get lost, as he wouldn't probably have any money to buy it. As Kyo starts to argue with the shopkeeper as to how he can just assume things, Michio's hand comes from behind with money in his hands. He then puts the money on the counter and tells the shopkeeper to give him that loaf of bread. Michio then hands over the bread loaf to Kyo, saying that it's a thank you token for the information he gave him. With a bright smile on his face, he expresses his gratitude towards him for the loaf of bread. Looking up at Michio, Kyo asks him as to where he got the money from. Michio simply replies by saying that it's war spoils from earlier. Thinking back to the time when he looted the money off of Zeha, he tells Kyo that he doesn't do things like looting from killed soldiers, but in unknown places, money is important to survive. Looking up at Michio, Kyo mentions it to him, saying how he's like a completely different person. Opening up the door to his house, Kyo cheerfully informs his family that he's home. Running to his mom with bread loaf in his hands, he tells her how they have a feast today and that Michio brought it for them. Wearing a warm smile on her bony and pale face, she thanks Michio and calls out to Kyo that they should eat together. Rubbing his stomach, Kyo informs his mother that he has already eaten. Patting his head, his mother asks him if he truly has. Replying to her, he tells her not to worry about it and eat, saying that she needs to get proper nutrition. Seeing the happy moment, Michio suddenly notices something and pushes back against the door to their house. Shaking all over, he does his best to push the door to open it, but isn't able to do so because of the heavy force being applied on it from the other side. Suddenly, fire bursts into the house from all sides. Standing in front of the house are the culprits, and the one commanding them is Zeha. While licking his knife, he says that the penalty for opposing him will be paid with death. While pushing back against the door, he realizes that people are blocking them from the outside, and that it's an attack with around at least 8 or 9 people outside. He turns his gaze to look around for anything useful in the house that he could use as a weapon. He finally notices a pouch and hurries to grab it. Getting hold of the pouch, he grabs and runs towards the door with it. Surprised by his movements, Kyo asks him as to what exactly he is trying to do. With the force generated from the run, he kicks the door open, sending the ones who were holding off the door away flying as the door swings open from his kick. He then notices a couple of workers along with Zeha standing against him, with each holding a knife. With a grin, he commands the workers to surround him from all directions and cut off any escape route that he could have. Heeding to his command, the workers surround him from all sides. With a death glare, he looks at Zeha, asking him about his objective for burning down someone's house. With an enraged, loud voice, Zeha tells him that it's the crime of making him angry, the crime of defying him, and the crime of hurting him, and for that, he gets the maximum penalty, that is, a death sentence. Glaring at him, Michio says that starting from then on, he'll now annihilate the enemy forces without any mercy. Both Kyo and his mother walk towards their house's entrance, shoulder to shoulder, as Michio stands right in front of the door. Pointing with his finger, Michio tells them to run when they see an opening. A worker then lunges at Michio with his knife, ready to stab him, while yelling out, saying that he won't let them escape. As the worker appears right in front of Michio, ready to plunge his knife into him, seeing that Michio gets into position to dodge it. As he dodges the knife, he suddenly hits the man on his head with the pouch he took hold of from Kyo's house. With a bump on his head, the worker falls on the ground, seeing that Zeha shouts at him to explain himself as to what the hell he did to him. Holding the pouch in his hand with rocks inside them, he explains how this technique called blackjack is an improvised weapon that can be made with cloth and small stones. He then explains how this improvised weapon uses the centrifugal force to strike the target, delivering a tremendous impact upon hit. Swinging the pouch in his hand, he runs towards the workers with full speed as he explains how this weapon is easy to construct and that with its vicious power it is even favored by first-class assassins. While striking through the workers, he explains how this is a lethal weapon specialized for human body destruction. He then finally stands in front of Zeha and says that it's just him that's left for him to deal with. Lunging towards him with his knife as an act of desperation, he shouts at Michio, telling him not to keep messing with him. As Zeha dashes towards him, Michio suddenly attacks his hand with his pouch. Holding his battered arm, he falls to his knees as Michio walks towards him. Seeing him standing in front of him, Zeha begs to calm down, saying that there'll be no penalty against him anymore. Ready to swing down the pouch at his face, Michio says that any dangerous element that threatens his life must be eradicated immediately. Suddenly, Kyo runs and grabs Michio by his waist, telling him to stop, and further tells him that he absolutely must not kill, and no matter how strong he becomes, killing people isn't something he should do, and that he doesn't want him to become a murderer. Seeing the chance, Zeha gets up and runs away from him as tears and drools falling off as he runs away. Seeing him running away, Michio throws the pouch at him while gritting his teeth as Kyo doesn't let go of him. The pouch hits a tree, breaking it off, while Zeha looks back at his attack worriedly as he runs away. Michio looks at Kyo, who stands there with his hands on his knees as he thanks God that he stopped and didn't kill him. Kneeling in front of a man sitting on a couch, Zeha begs him to punish Michio as he mentions how he hit him and swung his weapons around, saying that he is getting out of control. Standing in front of Zeha, he tells him that it's unforgivable. Without further warning, the man suddenly punches Zeha in the face. Putting on his golden knuckles, the man tells him that a site supervisor who loses to a slave miner is unforgivable as Zeha kneels there in front of him, holding his broken nose. Letting out his tongue, he decides to give him a customer service course as he pulls back his hand to punch him again, while Zeha just sits there with tears flowing out of his eyes as he holds his broken nose. Holding his blood-soaked hand against his own face, he talks to himself, saying that this Michio fellow might be worth beating up. Kyo and his mother have now moved into Michio's house. As his mother takes up the bed to rest, Michio and Kyo sit on the ground as Kyo mentions as to how this is absolutely the worst-case scenario. Kyo stands by the window as he looks at his burnt house, while he mentions how hard they worked to build it only for it to get destroyed like this. Kyo's mother then calls out to Michio, asking him if it's really okay for them to live here. Tying the string of his bow, he says that it is strictly a transaction and that he needs them to provide him with all the information regarding the island's management system and food supply networks and other important matters. Annoyed by his way of talking, Kyo tells him to stop talking so coldly. Looking at Michio, he tells him that he's been weird since he lost his memory. Hearing that, Michio just silently sits there while thinking to himself that the kid is right, saying that he's being like a totally different person than the Michio they used to know. He then remembers back to the time he was betrayed by his allies and killed, saying that it might have been something orchestrated by Captain Beck himself. With a pissed-off look on his face, he thinks to himself, saying that he definitely isn't going to let that slide and he'll definitely get off this island and annihilate the traitors. In the morning, he decides to exercise and starts by doing a handstand. After doing just 2 handstand push-ups, his body starts to shake as he reaches his limit. He then thinks to himself that he needs to rebuild his muscle strength and core from zero. He then notices Masa running towards him while calling for him. Getting back on his legs, he thinks to himself that this guy is from the time when he first met Zeha. Masa then tells Michio to hurry up or he'll be late for the mining site. Hearing that, Michio realizes that it would be a good opportunity for him to gather as much information as possible. In the mining site, Michio lines up along with the other miners. Michio then suddenly notices the workers standing beside him and thinks to himself that these are Zeha's cronies that he beat up. A man standing in front of them shouts at them, saying that there's an emergency announcement today. Gritting his teeth, this man says that Zeha, who was in charge of supervising G Squad, has died. He then points his finger towards Masa, calling him G8. He then tells him that he'll be replacing Zeha, hearing that Masa stands there surprised at his announcement. As the miners continue to mine, the story goes that the slave miners are forced into manual labor in the tunnels from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. It continues saying how the working environment is terrible and harsh, but it's pitch-black labor befitting the name of the slaves. A worker then suddenly hits another worker in the gut, calling him deadweight because he was working too slow. Putting his hand over the hurt worker's shoulder, he tells him how the other squads are the same as always, but he's the supervisor here, and he assures him that he won't hit anyone and tells him to continue digging at his own pace. With admiration in his teary eyes, he calls as Supervisor Masa. Walking over to another worker, Masa tells him to rest a bit as he looks a bit too tired. Suddenly, the worker who kicked the other worker in the gut comes to Masa, loudly asking him as to what kind of method he is trying to imply by being kind to mere slaves. He then suddenly pushes away Masa, saying that a supervisor shouldn't be doing something so weak. Clenching his fist, he at the workers with a smirk on his face, he tells them how spoiled guys piss him off and asks them if he should discipline them instead. Suddenly, a pickaxe hits his leg. As it hits his leg, he lets out a grunt in pain and asks as to who the hell did that. Wearing an unapologetic face, Michio approaches from behind and says that his hand slipped and apologizes. Closing the distance between them, the man says that such a half-assed apology won't be enough for accidentally hurting him and that he looks like he's the one who needs to be disciplined. Suddenly, the person who beat Zeha to pulp approaches them saying that if it's a fight, then they should let him join in too. Seeing that man, some workers whisper among themselves how the troublemakers are finished, as it's Kusanagi himself interfering. Getting scared in his presence, the troublemaker man says that he absolutely wouldn't dare fight with him. With a sudden leap, Kusanagi appears right in front of the troublemaker man, ready to punch him while he tells him to drop dead if he's not going to be fighting. Kusanagi's punch hits the man on the lateral side of his frontal skull bone, knocking him out. Looking at the punch, Michio thinks to himself that it's not just raw power, and that he struck the vital points of the human body precisely. Looking at Michio, Kusanagi asks him if he'll be fighting him currently. With a blank expression on his face, Michio tells him that he doesn't believe in meaningless fights. Hearing that, Masa approaches Michio from behind, calling out to him and tells him to use respectful language. Kusanagi stands intrigued as he hears the name Michio, asking if it's really Michio. Rushing towards him with a huge grin on his face, he mentions how he's been wanting to meet him. Seeing him dash towards him, Michio gets his guard up and gets into a fighting stance. He then throws multiple punches at once at him, which he easily blocks. Looking at Kusanagi continuous attacks, the workers worry amongst themselves as how Michio might not survive against such a barrier of attacks. As he continues to block against his punches, Michio thinks to himself how his speed, weight, and accuracy all are first class. He continues, saying that even though his physical traits are all first class but wide swings always create openings. Using that opportunity, Michio dodges that punch by leaping sideways. Using his bodily force, he punched Kusanagi in his face. The workers stand there with shock and terror are visible in their faces as they say how he landed a hit on Kusanagi. Looking up, Michio realizes that his punch never hit Kusanagi and was blocked by him as Kusanagi looks at this with a huge grin on his face. Excited by Michio's skills, Kusanagi tells him that they should fight until one of them is crushed. Suddenly, a person arrives from somewhere and shouts at them to be silent. The workers all fall to their knees while bowing down their heads to him. This person is director Aketchi. He walks through the bowed crowds towards Kusanagi and Michio. With a glint of furiousness in his eyes, he calls out to Kusanagi. Responding to him, Kusanagi turns to face him. Aketchi then suddenly asks him if he intends to break the slaves with meaningless fights. With a stern look on his face, Aketchi looks at him and asks him if he wants to be reported to the Blood Oath family. Laughing nervously, he walks towards Aketchi saying that it's just educational guidance and that he has no intention of breaking them. Aketchi simply walks past him asking him if he calls it guidance when all he can do is brawl. With a mocking expression on his face, he continues and tells him to not make him laugh and that he doesn't expect brainwork from an idiot. He then walks up to the workers, asking them if their job is crawling around. With a disgusted expression on his face, he looks at them and tells them to keep digging without wasting a single second if they don't want to be disposed of. Currently, it's 2 p.m., time for lunch break. Eating a bit of food from his lunchbox, Michio remarks how it is cold and tasteless. The workers then start complaining how this much food is not enough for lunch, and that the supervisors receive pretty good food quality, getting to eat their fill. Suddenly, Masa approaches Michio and hands over his lunchbox to him, telling him to eat it. Michio first stares at it blankly, then outright denies him, saying that he doesn't want it. Shocked by the denial, Masa asks him as to why he does not want it. Eating from his lunchbox, Michio says that he doesn't intend to owe favors. Sitting beside Michio, Masa lets out a sigh, saying that it's not a favor and that it's trouble fees from that time when they had trouble with Zeha and he blamed him just because he was a coward. Showing genuine care and worry, he tells how it doesn't sit right with him and that it's at least the most he can do to apologize and asks him to eat his lunchbox. Taking a piece of fried chicken from it, Michio says that for one false statement, one piece of fried chicken is appropriate. As Michio chews on the fried chicken, he tells Masa that they're even and that he should eat his lunch now. Suddenly, 2 workers approach him from behind saying that if he doesn't want it, he should just give it to them. Masa then tiredly says that as it can't be helped, he'll give each a piece of fried chicken, and that's it. Heading that, the 2 workers ask him if that is really okay to do. Suddenly, a person who put Masa as the supervisor comes and asks them as to how long do slaves plan to keep eating, and then he orders them to stand up quickly and get back to their position and start mining. As they continue to work, the story goes as to how slave miners are forced into nothing harsh physical labor and that they have no human rights. Suddenly, an old man passing by Masa falls to the ground with bubbles coming out of his mouth. Seeing the elderly fall suddenly like that, Masa kneels to tend to him and asks him if he's okay and tells him to hang in there, while a person walks over to them seeing such an incident happen and tells Masa to move away. This person then kicks the old man who fainted, making his turn to lie on his back. He then crouches to check the pulse of the old and announces him dead. He then shouts at the other workers saying that this is their trash and tells them to go and dump it above ground. Masa trembles in sorrow as he tells Michio to not push himself too hard. The story then goes on as it depicts that in here, human life is lighter than garbage, and that over something as trivial as death, the mining doesn't stop. A person then rings a bell informing them that the work is finished for today. Trembling in exhaustion, Masa tries to stand through with the help of his shovel as he lets out a sigh of relief saying that it's finally finished. With a surprised expression on his face, he looks at Michio, asking as to why he still looks so energetic. Taking off his helmet, Michio replies by saying that he's used to this level of workload. Shocked at how nonchalantly Michio just said that, Masa thinks to himself if Michio was always this tough. The person once again rings the bell calling to Masa's squad to not dawdle. Hearing that warning, Masa apologizes to him. After mining is done, they are forcibly made to remove their clothes and made to walk naked. They then undergo thorough body searches to check if they've stolen ore. Only after all this is done do they finally return to the surface where a person calls out to them and hands them the wages for their work. Taking his daily wage of 1,000 yen, Michio thinks to himself how unfair it is to only get paid this little even after working for 16 hours a day. Michio then notices another miner acting happy after receiving such a small amount as a wage, as the person says how much this makes him happy. Suddenly, a food cart comes rolling with two women first congratulating them for their hard work mining today, and announces to them saying that it's time for a Smiley Sale. With a forced smile on her face, the shop lady mentions that today is Mining Appreciation Day with 20% off on everything. Michio stands there surprised as the miners alongside him start running towards the cart excitedly. The first person to get there asks for a packet of potato chips and a can of beer. After he gets his orders, the other lady tells him to take some dried squid too, as those might not be enough for him. Suddenly, the crowd gathers in front of the cart giving out their orders. Suddenly hearing all that the woman in the cart asks them to calm down and says that there's enough for everyone. Drinking the beer he bought off his wage, the man lets out a content sigh saying how it soaks into his very soul. The other person says that being stingy on Appreciation Day is the height of inefficiency, and that he's going all out with a luxurious 1,000 yen splurge. Michio stands there looking at them thinking how just moments ago they were treating them like slaves and now they're treating them with such respect and courtesy. Masa stands beside Michio, drooling at the sight in front of him, saying how everyone's so lucky. Looking at him, Michio asks him as to why he isn't buying anything. Wiping off his drool, Masa says that he has decided to endure until he gets the Paradise Pass. Surprised on hearing that word for the first time, Michio asks him as to what a Paradise Pass is. Hearing him say that, Masa surprisedly asks if he doesn't remember about how they told them about it when they came to this island. Going into a flashback, Mesa remembers his first day on the island while a person standing in front of them explains to them that from today itself they are slaves crawling at the bottom of the earth. Looking at the slaves, the man then says that they will be worked beyond their limits and given only scraps of food, their lives will be worse than livestock. Holding up a golden paper, the Paradise Pass in his hand, he mentions how even hell's judgment depends on money, and that if they want to grab the spider's thread, they will have to save 1 million yen and buy this Paradise Pass, and with that, they will be given freedom off the island. The people start to get excited on seeing that there is at least some hope for them to escape this place, and that they'll definitely start saving up to buy the Paradise Pass. With a determined look on his face, Masa mentions saying that's when he decided that no matter how much he is kicked around and no matter if he collapses from overwork, he won't spend money no matter what. Michio then makes out a theory of his own, saying how there is no rebellion despite the terrible conditions and that it's thanks to two carrots, the first being the carrot called hope, in the form of the Paradise Pass. He then mentions the other carrot being called pleasure, in the form of Appreciation Day, and how people forget hope while drowning in pleasure. With a seriously disgusted look on his face, he realizes that the mining site employees and those backing them understand this and are doing their best to exploit it. Holding his wage, he walks towards Masa, asking him as to how much does he have left for the Paradise Pass. Surprised by that question, he asks him why he wants to know about that. Looking right into his eye, Michio assures him to not worry and that he won't leak confidential information. Handing him his wage, Michio tells him that he just wants to support his escape. Walking by the cliff, Michio repeats how there's only just 60,000 yen left to go. Holding his chin, Michio says that adding his salary makes it 2,000 yen per day, and that they'll be able to achieve it in 30 days. Worried and confused, Masa asks him, saying that though he's grateful for the help, he still doesn't understand why Michio would go so far as to help him out like this. Standing by the edge of the cliff, Michio looks down at the sea as he speaks, saying that it's all for his own sake. Looking at the waterbed covered in rocks, Michio asks Masa if there is any beach or dock on this island. Pointing straight, Masa says that there really is no such a place on this island. Crouching down by the cliff, Masa tells him of how this island is surrounded by steep cliffs on all sides. Michio then decides to climb down the cliff, saying that he should check below as well. As he starts to climb down, Masa calls out to him, saying that it's dangerous to do something like that, and that escape is illegal. Hearing that, Michio questions by asking him if there is really law in this lawless zone. Michio suddenly notices a drone equipped with a gun, and he realizes that it's a military drone. Seeing the drone, Michio suddenly climbs back up. He then looks at Masa and tells him to start running. Unable to understand what is happening, Masa asks him as to what he is trying to say. Suddenly, a bullet grazes Masa by his cheek as it goes past him. Masa hurriedly starts running away in panic as Michio follows him from behind. As they continue to run away, the drone showers them with a barrage of bullets, which luckily doesn't hit them. Looking back at the drone in the sky, Michio realizes that this drone is SG, Nemesis 1.0. This drone targets anything that's moving within its search range, and it relentlessly pursues targets it identifies to the end of the earth. While continuing to run away from it, Michio then mentions that it is nicknamed the Mad Pursuer, a killing weapon that has made many soldiers tremble in fear. While running, Michio suddenly takes the lead and turns to his side and tells him to follow him. Seeing him turn, Masa mentions that there's no path the way Michio is taking. Hurriedly, Michio just tells him to charge through the bushes and all. The drone continues to follow behind them, adapting to the change in surroundings. As Michio breaks through the branch as he rushes through, he thinks to himself, realizing that this drone is specialized for tracking performance. After seeing the speed at which the drone is chasing them, Michio realizes that at the speed they're going in, they will soon be shot to death. He then notices a wild mouse on a tree trunk and decides to take it and use it as a distraction. While running, he looks back at Masa and tells him to stop and not move at all when his counting reaches 0. Hearing that, Masa worriedly tells Michio to not be stupid, else they might simply turn into Swiss cheese made by the drone itself. Without speaking anything further, Michio starts counting down. They continue to run across the forest, luckily dodging every bullet. Looking at the mouse in his hand, Michio asks it to forgive him as it continues to squeak in his hand. With his countdown reaching 0, he throws the mouse at the drone. The mouse perfectly hits the motion-sensing camera on the drone, making it search for moving targets once again. And it soon finds the only moving target, it being the wild mouse running on a branch, and then he barrages it with bullets, shooting through it in one go. The drone then turns to Michio and Masa, as they just stood there like a statue, not having a single movement. Michio and Masa have frozen themselves in their tracks, suddenly coming to a halt in running position. The drone flies around them in circles, trying to notice any slight movement from them. Having found no movement, it flies away from them, announcing that execution is complete. Masa then suddenly falls on his back, bawling his eyes out, thanking God for letting him live for one more day. With tears still flowing out of his eyes, he looks at Michio and asks him as to what the hell was that thing that was following them. Grabbing his hand, Michio explains, saying that it was an indiscriminate killing drone developed by the Aldemir Republic, specialized in tracking ability. And because it's indiscriminate, it can't distinguish between enemy and ally, making it a defective product that long ago disappeared from battlefields. Still grabbing onto his hand, Masa surprisedly asks if that thing was really used in battles, and that Michio sure seems to know a lot about it. Pulling him up by his hand, Michio looks up at the sky, thinking to himself as to why the crazy chaser, the Mad Pursuer, is in a place like this, and how its sales and lending it to other countries should have been prohibited due to the danger it possesses. He then thinks if this island has any connection to the Aldemir military. He then returns back to his house, where Kyo seems to be cooking something, and on noticing Michio enter, he greets him. With a growl coming from his stomach, he mentions how he is late. Hearing that, Kyo's mother weakly tells him that he should first say welcome home to him. Looking at him cooking, Michio asks him as to what he is cooking. Kyo simply answers him by asking if he already forgot about his specialty leftover stew and how much he used to love it. Serving a bowl full of his stew, Kyo mentions how it's all thanks to him that he was able to buy such high-quality leftover stew. Looking at the stew, Michio thinks to himself that it doesn't look like anything of high quality leftover to him. Sitting together around a table, Kyo prays before he could dig into his food. Kyo cheerfully shouts out saying how it smells really good to him. Chewing on his food, Michio thinks to himself how it's terribly sour, and if this is something humans should eat, and that military rations would be way better than this. Having the first bite of the stew, Kyo happily cheers up saying how it tastes so delicious. Surprised by Kyo's behavior, Michio whispers to his mother asking as to what type of taste buds he has to think that it's delicious. His mother then whispers back saying how on this island even leftovers aren't easy to buy, and since he was little, he's been eating even much worse things. Excitedly, Kyo shows off the little piece of meat that he found in his stew, calling it a big hit. He then happily eats it saying how irresistible it is. He then pulls out his hand and asks Michio to give him his salary, the real money he earned today. Ignoring him, he simply drinks his stew and tells him that he gave it to Masa. While he finishes his stew, he says that he also plans to keep giving him his money. Hearing that, Kyo suddenly stands up shouting out a big "what" in shock. Pointing at his spilled stew, Kyo says that it's his fault that he spilled his stew. Kneeling over near the stew, with tears welling up in his eyes, Kyo mentions how there was still some left in it. Putting down his bowl, he stands up and tells Kyo that he has a good use for it, and further tells him to pick up the leftovers and follow him. They are now in the first with a straw basket in front of them. As Michio holds the leftover stew in the bowl, Kyo asks him as to what he is trying to do with the leftover stew and the straw basket right in the middle of the forest. Michio then empties the stew in the bowl onto the ground. Seeing that, Kyo exclaims in shock. Worriedly, Kyo accuses him of throwing away his cooking. Sticking up a stick near the stew, he tells him that he didn't throw it away. Putting the straw basket with the support of the stick, Michio says that what he's trying to do is called recycling. Finally done setting up the trap, Michio tells him as to how even smelly leftovers are a decent feast for beasts, and that in other words, is enough to lure prey. Pointing at it, Kyo asks him about what he can catch with this trap. Michio replies by saying that it's probably possible to catch small animals like mice and so on. With a disgusted look on his face, Kyo asks him if it is even safe to eat mice, and mentions how people have gotten sick and died from them. Turning back and walking away from the trap, he tells Kyo how it's mostly sewer rats in the city that are the hotbeds of pathogens, but forest mice are a valuable protein source. Looking back at Kyo, he tells him that if he doesn't like the idea of eating mice, then they should walk a bit further. Walking through the branches, Kyo asks him if he's going to be setting more traps. Walking forward, Kyo confusedly tells him that he surely doesn't need to set them in such thick bushes. Replying to Kyo, Michio says that thick bushes is exactly why it's good. Their eyes fall upon a bird trapped in a simple mechanism that Michio set up using just a caterpillar. Michio looks back to Kyo and asks if this much is enough for today's meal money. With glowing eyes, he replies by saying that it is. In the mining site management building, there are people standing in front of Aketchi reading out reports on this week's mining output and deaths. The person who appointed Masa as the supervisor informs him, saying that this week's mining output is 643.72 tons, and that a total of 9 slaves have died. Reading the report, he then says how that's a lot of deaths, and that most of the deaths are thought to be from malnutrition or overwork. This person is Deputy Director Ueshima. He then says how slave life is still a life and asks him if they should increase meals and extend break times. Throwing away the reports he was given to take a look at, he tells them that the company's evaluation criteria doesn't include the word human life. Before Ueshima could say anything further, he stops him saying that he should not make him repeat the same thing twice. With a serious look on his face that if he were to just increase the mining output, then his evaluation increases and promotion to headquarters comes faster as well. Wearing a scary expression on his face, he says how much he doesn't want to stay on this garbage island and orders Ueshima to prioritize mining over the number of slaves they use up. Not knowing what to say further, Ueshima simply bows head slightly saying that he understands his task. Another deputy director reports to him, saying that the total wages are 2.8 million yen and that merchandise sales are 2.523 million yen with a recovery rate of 90%. With a devilish grin on their faces, they mention how those miners were drinking and eating idiots right after getting their wages. Touching his specs, he mentions how these workers have beast-level intelligence for biting at the carrot in front of them and getting caught in the trap. He then looks back at the deputy directors and asks them if they have any other report to make. One of the deputy directors comes forward and mentions he heard that G8 Masa has been aiming for a paradise pass. Hearing that report, all the other deputy directors burst into laughter, saying how a slave miner is dreaming of saving 1 million yen. and that there's no way he would be able to save that much. Hearing that report, Aketchi starts to eerily grin. It is in the morning, and Masa is standing in front of Michio's house and knocks on the door, asking if he's awake. Masa suddenly hears his voice from beside his house. Masa looks surprised at what he sees when he peeks beside his house. To his surprise, Masa finds Michio holding his whole body's weight with just one hand while using a cloth. Looking at the approaching Masa, he asks him what he wants. With confusion visible on his face, he says that he thought that maybe they could go to work together. He then suddenly asks him again as to what he is doing. Landing on the ground, Michio says that as he can see this current body of his too weak, with determination overflowing in his eyes, he says that in order to achieve his objective, he needs much more physical strength. Looking at him with a warm smile, Masa mentions how he is so strange. The door to Michio's house suddenly opens up, rubbing his eyes, half asleep. Kyo comes out asking who it is that is being so noisy in the morning. Looking at Masa standing there, he asks him of his identity. Pointing at himself, he introduces himself saying that he's Masa and he's Michio's co-worker. Kyo suddenly presents his hand to him, telling him to give back the money he took from Masa, saying that it's their food money. Holding his stomach with a sorrowful expression on his face, he tells him how they're always starving here. Looking at Kyo's hands, Masa thinks of that one time his sister mentioned how she was feeling really hungry while walking alongside Masa back home. He then remembers the look of happiness and fulfillment on his sister's face when she said how much she loves his bread crust rusk. With a warm expression on his face, Masa thinks to himself that he wants to feed Yui more if his bread crust rusks again. He then gets down on one knee and faces Kyo directly as he gently apologizes for taking Michio's money and tells him that he'll bring something delicious the next time he comes over and asks him to forgive him. Turning his face away, Kyo specifically tells him to bring something worth 1,000 yen, and soon Michio walks towards them, ready to leave for work. In the underground mining site tunnels, they are all currently working while the guy called Haida walks wobbly as he carries a bunch of ores in a basket. Having noticed that, Masa calls out to a guy called Ishizuka to provide cover for Haida and tells him that 2 people working together is better. Heeding his command, Ishizuka rushes to Haida's aid and offers to carry one side in the basket that Haida alone was carrying. Suddenly, Aketchi, along with the deputy directors, enter complimenting Masa on his excellent leadership skills, saying how he's also properly considering safety and how that makes him outstanding for his leadership skills. Taking off his helmet and standing straight, he greets Director Aketchi and asks him as to why he knows about him. Replying to his question, he says that it's because he's famous. Walking towards Masa, he says how the rumors about him seem to be true, that a site supervisor who unites his squad without relying on violence and can increase production. Hearing such praise from the director himself, Masa bows down his head in happiness, thanking him for such praise. Aketchi then looks at him and smiles and says that there's no need for him to be so tense, and that the reason he came here today is because he wanted to give a special reward to a promising person like him. Looking at him, he says that having incentives might surely boost one's motivation, while Deputy Director Ueshima looks away in guilt. Talking to him, Aketchi says that it's dangerous to hand it over in a public place like this, as he'd never know when he might be targeted here. He then signals him with his hand, telling him to follow him to a safe place to receive his reward. Masa then rushes over to Michio, whispering to him, asking if he heard what just happened and that it might help save up for the Paradise Pass all at once. With a slight bit of worry showing on his face, he looks at Masa and tells him to at least not let his guard down because of the reward. Cheerfully, Masa tells him that he's just overthinking it and that he should just accept people's goodwill honestly. Waving at Michio, Masa runs after them in excitement while shouting out to Michio, telling to wait for him with anticipation. While walking out of the mine, the guy who killed Zeha smirks and asks him if his name is Michio. Turning his head back with a mischievous grin on his face, he asks him if he's worried about his friend and that they are going to be having a party at his place currently. Hearing that, Michio realizes that his suspicions might come true and looks at him with a pissed-off look on his face. Now they've all appeared in front of Masa's house. He then says that it might be a dirty little room unfit for the gentlemen they are. With a normal grin forming on his face, Aketchi mentions that a private room is more convenient to discuss. Opening the door to his house, he walks first and welcomes them in. Presenting his house, he asks them to excuse him and that he'll go and make some tea for them. Holding his nose with a disgusted look on his face, Aketchi says how this room is dirtier than he imagined it to be and how it's making his nose rot. He then commands the deputy directors behind him to go ahead and search his house. Hearing that, they walk forward, deciding to search every nook and cranny. Masa then looks around at them, asking as to what they are trying to do while Kusanagi walks towards him. He then suddenly hits Masa right in the gut. He then falls on the floor and suddenly, a deputy director comes and sits on his back as he holds his hands up behind him. Looking at Masa like he's not even worth more than a bug, Aketchi asks him where he is hiding the money with which he plans on buying a paradise pass. Holding him by his hair, he pulls his head up, telling him to speak up and he'll only be losing his money that way. With drool and spit flowing down his mouth, he asks if that story about the special reward was a lie they used to deceive him. Aketchi then asks him if he realizes that just now and mentions how slaves have rock-bottom intelligence. With tears flowing out of his eyes and spit and drool flowing out of his mouth, he realizes that he was tricked and tells them that he doesn't have any money and that he's just a normal slave. He then throws his head away, saying that he's just wasting his time by playing dumb. He then calls out to one of his deputy directors and he comes forward holding a plier in his hand. The deputy director then crouches in front of Masa, holding his front tooth with the plier. With a merciless expression on his face, Aketchi tells him to go for it. And so, in a single try, he forcibly pulls out one tooth of Masa from his mouth. As he does so, Masa cries out in excruciating pain as blood starts gushing out from the place his tooth was in. Looking at him with a serious expression on his face, he reminds him as to how he just told him that he'll only be losing money if he starts talking honestly. With a terrifying expression on his face, Aketchi then gives him a choice, asking him whether he will honestly give them the location of where the money is or would he be willing to lose something else. Night has already fallen over them, and Masa's team has finally come out of the mining site, while the others talk amongst themselves, saying how late Supervisor Masa is taking to return, and that the director might have taken a liking to him, so he's probably having a delicious meal as of now. Michio then notices Deputy Director Ueshima and thinks to himself that this man was definitely with Aketchi as they took Masa with them. Michio then suddenly approaches Ueshima and asks where Masa, G8, has gone. Seeing him approaching him so suddenly, Ueshima stumbles upon his own words and says that he doesn't know where he is. Looking at Ueshima, Michio asks him directly as to what they are all scheming. While sweating profusely, he looks away. He then tells Michio that it's better if he doesn't pry too much as he too might have a place to return to. The torture on Masa even now, with him being left with only a couple of teeth in his mouth. Looking at Masa, he once again tells him that it would be rational of him to tell them the location of his money, else he won't even be able to eat at all if this torture were to continue any longer than it has. While he lies there writhing in pain and hopelessness, he still denies them of not knowing the location to where the money is. He slyly laughs at him. How pitiful he is to even lack the intelligence to make this level of judgment. They then forcibly put back in one of his teeth from where they took it out of. Aketchi maintains his laugh through Masa's continued screams, asking him if it is good that he has now gotten one of his teeth back. He then commands the deputy director doing that torture to repeat the process of tooth extraction and implantation. With a clap of his hands, the deputy director extracts his tooth, and with another clap he implants it back into its place. And so they continue on with the process of extraction and implantation, ignoring his cries of pleas and screams of pain. And it keeps continuing further and further without any mercy on Masa. Finally, not being able to endure the pain, he screams at them, telling them to stop. With a pissed-off look on his face, Kusanagi stands beside Aketchi as he asks him if he's ready to cough up the location of the money. Masa lies there, wheezing, out of breath from the countless times he was tortured upon. With tears flowing out of his eyes, he still decides that he won't let them know the location of the money, as he has a reason to get off this island. He then remembers the moment when his sister apologized to him for how expensive the surgery might have been for him to afford, and how he showed her a confident smile, saying that he found himself a job. He then remembers his promise to her, as how he would earn plenty of money and buy lots of souvenirs for her. While on death's door, he thinks to himself that if he were to hand over the money, then he might not be able to live at all, and his sister will be left all alone to fend for herself. Looking at him annoyedly, Aketchi asks him how long he plans on being stubborn and if he wants to lose all his teeth like this and not from old age. With his weepy face and stuttering voice, he continues on how he doesn't have any money with him. Suddenly, Kusanagi walks forward and hits the back of the head of the deputy director, torturing Masa. With worry showing on his face, Aketchi asks him what he thinks he's doing. Turning to Aketchi, he asks him if he really doesn't get it, even after seeing this for so long, that this guy won't crack with such methods. He then pulls Masa close to his face by holding his collar and tells him that he has changed his opinion of him after seeing all this. With a serious and strong punch to his chest, he cracks some of his ribs with his fist. As he feels his ribs breaking, he lets out a really loud cry in agony, spitting out blood from his mouth. He then falls to the ground on his knees as Kusanagi commends how he won't even crack after all this and that he has proven himself to be a real man with all this. Wearing a really mischievous smile on his face, he tells him that this is what makes him worth beating up. Kusanagi prepares to punch Masa again with his overwhelming physical strength that crushes bones in one hit. Violence that genuinely enjoys hurting people. Masa looks up at him with teary eyes and bloodied mouth. It makes Masa think that pain and terror that is made of being tortured with tooth extraction seems much better than these bone-crushing punches. Letting his tongue out to excitement, he tells Masa that he better not die on him. With the punch about to hit him, he remembers how his sister, Yui, denied him saying that she doesn't want any souvenirs as long as her brother is with her. And so the punch hits him once again on his chest. Adjusting his glasses, Aketchi asks him if it hurts and if it's painful for him and tells him that if he were to talk honestly, then he'll make them stop. And so another punch hits him on his chin. He then remembers his sister's heartwarming, beautiful smile as she tells him how much she loves him. With another punch hitting him, he gets thrown back. Seeing his stubbornness, Aketchi shouts at him and tells him to spit it out as to where he has hidden the money. Standing his ground even after getting beaten so badly, he still tells them that he doesn't know where the money is. Aketchi finally snaps after hearing him say that and orders Kusanagi to kill him. And soon Michio seems to be rushing towards Masa's place. He then finally arrives at his place only to find it beaten to a near-death situation, lying on the ground while wheezing. With lifeless eyes, he calls out to Michio. Michio then rushes to his side and holds him in his hand as Masa continues to wheeze. Looking at the battered Masa, he soon notices that his 6th to 10th ribs have been fractured, and the broken bones must have damaged his lungs, thus resulting in his abnormally rapid breathing. He then opens his mouth and sees that many teeth have fallen out, with nasal bone and orbital floor broken, plus multiple skull fractures with stab and cut wounds in the mouth. Checking his pulse, he realizes that his pulse is really weak with aortic damage and traumatic shock. Holding him close, he thinks to himself as to what sort of torture one has to go through to end up like this. Mesa looks at Michio and tells him his warning was right and that they were really after his money, but he still protected it to the end. Faintly smiling, he mentions how he can't use the money anymore and tells Michio that he's now giving it to him. Michio, on hearing that, straightforwardly tells him that he doesn't accept favors and tells him to wait for his body to recover and use it himself. Grabbing onto his hand, he begs him to accept it. With tears flowing down his face, he tells him that he knows he's about to die and at this rate, it'll be wasted money if Michio doesn't take it. He then tells him of the location where the money is. He says that if he were to walk straight from this house, there's a big tree with cuts on the coast, and that the money is buried at the base of that tree. He mentions how he saved that money desperately, but now he's giving it all to him, and tells Michio of his one last dying wish he hopes for Michio to fulfill. Looking at him, he tells him that when he gets off this island, he should go and find his sister. Masa then remembers the time when his sister gifted him a piece of cloth as his birthday present. Seeing that cloth, he asks her if she cut it off from her favorite skirt. With a bright smile on her face, she tells him that she simply wanted to give him a present for always working so hard. While touching the cloth from his sister, he smiles in pain. He mentions how she's a really good girl and tells Michio to find her for him. Once again, Michio straightforwardly denies him and says that he can't accept that promise. He then grabs his arm with whatever life is left in him and begs him to accept that promise. As he lies there on his arms, he tells him that when he gets off this island, he should look for a girl named Honju Yui. And when he meets her, he wants him to apologize in his stead while also thanking her for everything. And like that, he finally takes his last breath. His body grows cold and lifeless in Michio's arms. Michio closes his own eyes, doing a moment of silence for this soul as Masa's tears fall from his cheeks in droplets showing memories of his sister. He then holds his lifeless body in his hands as he comes out of the house walking to the location Masa spoke to him, while someone watches him from a distance. He then puts his body near the tree and dogs up the money that Masa wanted him to have. Having dug up the money, he looks at Masa's lifeless body and says that he has received what he was asked to take. He then reaches for the piece of cloth on his arm and takes it off him. He covers his face with the cloth, saying that he'll keep it for him. Suddenly, a voice approaches him from behind, asking if he's dead. Looking at Michio with a glare while a smirk forms on his face, Aketchi tells him that Masa was a remarkably foolish man, suffering needlessly and losing both his life and money. And then he asks him if this is truly a fitting end for a bottom-tier trash. He then points at Michio, calling him a filthy slave and tells him to bring that filthy money to him. Standing up beside his corpse, Michio looks at them and tells him that he refuses to do such. Looking at him, he mentions how slaves are all really big idiots, and that he's also the same as that trash, Masa. He then points at him and tells the deputy directors to charge and take the money from him. Getting into his stance, Michio gets ready to mop the floor with them. He then dashes forward using his body force to punch one of the deputy directors heavily with his punch. He then rushes through all of them, defeating them all in a single strike. And with an uppercut, he knocks out the last deputy director, again in a single hit. Speaking of the money, he tells Aketchi that those are the war funds entrusted to him by Masa, and if he were to take it, then he would eliminate them himself. Aketchi then suddenly pulls out a gun from under his overcoat and points it at Michio. Holding his gun, Kusanagi forces it down and tells him to call it off as bullets are too precious to waste on a lowly, filthy slave like him. Cracking his knuckles, Kusanagi calls out to him and excitedly tells him that they can finally continue with their fight from that time. As he walks towards Michio, Aketchi tells him to not take too much and finish it as quickly as possible. They both stand against each other and take their stances. Kusanagi then suddenly rushes at Michio while grinning. He throws multiple punches at Michio, which he dodges each time, while learning that his opponent is a boxer and one with considerable training. Ready to punch him, Kusanagi commends him for his great footwork, saying that he can't win just by dodging hits. As he's just about to punch, Michio dodges its trajectory and appears right below laterally to Kusanagi. With agile movement, he punches him right in the liver as Kusanagi grits his teeth upon impact. As his fist is still in Kusanagi's chest, he commends him for the good liver blow, as that attack doesn't damage him even in the slightest. Looking at Michio, he tells him that he's going to give him a nice long massage in return for that great liver blow. Standing like a mountain in front of him, Kusanagi takes his stance to punch Michio. Holding his hands up close, Michio decides to take the blow and block it. As Kusanagi's attack hits him, Michio gets pushed back in impact even though he blocked his attack. Grinning while looking at them fight, Aketchi thinks to himself that no matter how cleverly a cat moves, it can't even beat a tiger. Holding his fists up close, Michio dashes towards Kusanagi. He then showers him with a barrage of punches to his face. Seeing Michio's punches, Aketchi thinks to himself that his punches seem too light, and that level of strike can't even stop Kusanagi. Kusanagi once again punches him while Michio blocks it again with his hands. He then flies back from the impact of that punch, even though he blocked it perfectly. He finally stops by the cliff, inches away from falling down. Looking at him cornered, Kusanagi rushes at him, ready to punch him. He asks him if he really thought he could win just by guarding, and if he really thought so, then he's too naive for this world. As his punch is about to hit him, Michio dodges it swiftly and decides to counter with a punch. Hitting him from over his hand, his attacks finally deal some damage to Kusanagi. Spitting out the blood, he says that it's just how he thought of it to be, while announcing how it is so entertaining to him. Excited, he once again rushes at Michio, saying that this is how a fight should be like. As he gets to strike, Kusanagi analyzes Michio's stance and scoffs at him for going with the counter stance again. Suddenly, Kusanagi's punch stops right in front of his face. About to kick him, Kusanagi mentions how he's not just punches. Adjusting his glasses, Aketchi thinks to himself how Michio is reading that Kusanagi has a boxing background and that he's correct for thinking so. It's not just punches that Kusanagi does, but kicks are also included, with the so-called kick just inches away from Michio's face. Michio skillfully blocks Kusanagi's kick with his hands. He then grabs Kusanagi by his waist and pushes him down to the ground. Seeing that scenario, Aketchi also looks at that, surprised to see such a scenario unfolding in front of his eyes. Skillfully, Michio locks his throat with his elbow and thigh, trying to make it difficult for him to breathe. Getting choked, Kusanagi curses at him as he asks him if he really was reading his moves. Stancing himself to strike Kusanagi's face with his elbow, he says that it was because of his high center of gravity and stable footwork, with characteristics of using striking techniques. And Michio's elbow hits Kusanagi directly on his face, precisely his nose. And Michio suddenly pulls himself back to prepare for another elbow strike. Noticing an opening, Kusanagi suddenly grabs him by his throat, saying how he was so close to winning this fight. He then slams Michio into the ground with a really strong force. While sitting on him, tightly grabbing him by his throat, he tells him that he might have won if it were a martial arts competition. But it isn't, and what they're doing right now is a fight with no rules or whatsoever. Adjusting his glasses, Aketchi thinks to himself as to how long it has been since he last saw Kusanagi being serious during a fight. He thinks back to the time when slave rebellions used to happen quite a lot, and that there were countless fighters confident in their skills, but none could beat Kusanagi. He then looks at Kusanagi from a distance, as he continues how Kusanagi is a brawler not bound by rules, and that there's no way he would lose to a mere fighter. With a burning spirit while widely grinning, as he continues to choke Michio, he tells him that he can't ever defeat him using polite martial arts.